Hello, reception and Key Stage 1, and welcome to this week's assembly. This week's assembly is brought to us by an organisation called Young Citizens. You'll see their logo in the top right-hand corner of the screen. And Young Citizens works with children and young people as they become adults and helps them really contribute to their society and their community. And this week is something called Justice Week, where children all ages are being taught a little bit about law, about our justice system, and about rules. And the assembly that we have for a reception and Key Stage 1 is all around the topic of why do we have rules? What would be really good is for you to pause the video and think of a time when you have been annoyed about a rule. Maybe it might have been a rule at home, it could have been a rule at school, but when has there been a time where you have felt really annoyed about a rule? Pause the video, have a discussion at home about this now. Well, now you've discussed that, we're going to listen to the story of Syra and her frustration with following rules. Syra, it's time for bed. Turn off the TV and go and brush your teeth, said Mum. Mum, the show has only just started, said Syra. The rule is that you have an early night when you have school the next day. That way you'll get plenty of rest and you are at your best. Syra stomped to the bathroom and scrubbed her teeth quickly. She was about to go to her room when her dad stopped her. Syra, you know our rules. We must brush our teeth for at least 2 minutes. Go back and clean them properly. Syra sighed. She went back into the bathroom and grumpily brushed her teeth again. She was so annoyed that she slammed the door on her way out. Syra, hissed Mum's voice from down the hall. You know our rules. You have to be quiet in the evenings or you'll wake your baby brother. Be thinking here, are Syra's rules at home like the rules that you have at your house? Rules, 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 thought Syra as she climbed into bed. I wish they'd go away. She reached out, switched off her bedside lamp and fell into a deep sleep. I wonder, at night time, do you think Syra made a good wish? Her wish there was, I wish they'd go away, as she thought about rules. The next morning, Syra was woken by a loud thud. She rubbed her eyes and called out, Hey, stop that! Her little brother had come into her room and was pulling toys and books off the shelves. Mum, Dad, Omar is making a mess in my room, yelled Syra. Mum popped her head around the door. He can do what he wants, she replied. But Omar is never normally allowed to come into my room, grumbled Syra as she walked into the kitchen for breakfast. To her surprise, there was no cereal in the cupboard and no bread to make toast. What can I have for breakfast? She asked her dad, who was sipping a cup of tea. Anything you want. You know that, he responded. Are you sure? Syra couldn't believe it. Yes, Syra, now stop bothering me. Syra went straight for the freezer and pulled out a tub of her favourite ice cream. She took out 3 huge scoops and covered them with chocolate sauce. Syra let out a gentle burp as she finished the last mouthful and looked up at the clock. It was 9 a.m. She was late for school. Frantically, she put on her clothes and brushed her teeth and hair. Mum, we should have left ages ago. Why didn't you tell me to hurry up, said Syra as she ran to the front door. What are you talking about, Syra? There's no rush, said Mum. How have Syra's parents changed overnight? Remember what Syra wished for just before she went to sleep. Rules, rules, rules. I wish they'd just go away. And what's happened to her parents? Stepping out onto the street, Syra was nearly knocked over by a cyclist racing along the pavement. Watch out, she cried. As she and Mum walked to the school, all around them was chaos. Drivers were tooting their horns angrily at each other. Cars sped past, many ignoring red traffic lights, and some even drove on the wrong side of the road. Several times, Syra's heart felt like it skipped a beat as she crossed the road. Her stomach, which was full of ice cream, was starting to hurt too. At last they reached the school gates, where Mum gave Syra a kiss and waved her goodbye. Although lessons had started, there were still lots of children in the playground. A group in the corner were playing basketball and had started shouting at each other. "Why don't you ever pass to us?" one ranted. "You don't have to," the pupil with the ball replied. "Yes, you do, or we'll never get a chance to play," groaned the others. As Syra entered the building, the usually calm corridors were filled with lots of talking of children who were wandering in and out of their classrooms. Outside her classroom, coats and bags had been flung into a messy pile that almost blocked the door. Syra carefully hung up her jacket and pushed her way into the room, tripping as she went. What problems have now started in Syra's community and her school? It seems to me that Syra had gone to bed and she had wished for something, and really the reality was not good. So let's discuss these questions, and you can talk about them at home. What has happened in Syra's world? Can you describe what Syra might see as she enters her classroom? What are the problems of having no rules? How would you feel if you lived in this world? And if there were no rules, what rules would you miss? And finally, why do we have rules? So some of the problems that you might have discussed in your conversation there is without rules, there'd be chaos and confusion. People wouldn't be safe or they wouldn't feel protected. People wouldn't know what to do. The drivers in Syra's story and the cyclists didn't know how to behave. And people would be disrespectful. And I think that it would be very unfair if there were no rules. And I think very quickly you would realise that it would be an unfair place to live if we did not have rules. So we have rules for lots and lots of different reasons. And first off, they can help to protect and care for people. For example, in Syra's family, they had a rule to brush your teeth for 2 minutes to make sure they're clean and healthy. And I have that rule in my household too. And I always make sure that my daughter brushes her teeth for 2 minutes. And rules on speed limits are meant to keep drivers and pedestrians safe. That road sign there says 30 miles an hour. And in some cities as well, in some places near school, the speed limit's actually 20 miles an hour to try and keep pedestrians and drivers safe. Rules can also help protect and care for our environment. Now, in Syra's house, her brother is not usually allowed into her room because he's too young to know how to care for her things. And at our school, the rule is to put litter into a bin. This keeps the building and the playground clean and tidy. Rules are really important to build respectful relationships. Now, parents and carers often have rules about manners, like saying please and thank you to people who help us. And that reminds us to be polite and kind to each other. And we have those rules here at school. We say good manners matter. When you collect your lunch, we always expect people to make eye contact and say please and thank you. And in our classrooms, we always take turns to give our answers. And in that way, everyone is listened to. We also have rules to keep order and stop confusion. For example, you need to know the rules of a game to play it. They help the game run smoothly and make sure that everyone plays fairly. And out on the road, the rules help us make sure that traffic moves in an organised way. Everybody has to follow the traffic signals so that they know when it is safe to drive and when they need to stop. Now, I'm going to give you on the next slide after this some different rules. And I want you to have a think about, are they rules that you would have at home? Are they rules that would be agreed by your family? Are they school rules? So things that we would have within our school community, say here at Arkswift. And also, could they be laws? So rules that have been agreed by Parliament. And Parliament is where the government are, and they make the rules for the country. And you'll see that that illustration just below the word laws is the Houses of Parliament, and you might recognise Big Ben. So have a think. Home rule, school rule, or law? So the different ones we've got. Bedtime is 7 p.m. So you would think, is that a home rule, a school rule, or the law. So hopefully you would think bedtime, well, that would be a home rule. The rest I'm going to let you work out yourselves. You must wear your uniform. You must not take something from a shop without paying for it. You cannot have pudding until you've eaten your dinner. Everyone has to tidy the classroom at the end of a lesson. People must wear a seatbelt in a car. You cannot have a mobile phone until you are 14 years old. You must be at school by 8:45 a.m. So be thinking, home rule, school rule, or law. If you need more time to organise those into the 3 different categories, you can pause the video here. There are a few more on the next slide. Children must be given an education. You must share your toys. You must bring your PE kit to class each day. You must not go into someone else's house or home unless you're invited. You cannot cook in a kitchen without an adult. You must not talk when the teacher is talking. And you must not drop your litter on the streets. Home rule, school rule, or law. Have a think about the rules that you've just looked at. What did you like about those rules? And do you think any of them should be changed, and why? And the final activity you might like to do to help you think about rules would be to design a board game. And you could design a board game for your class to play, or you could design it to play at home whilst you're still learning at home this week. And you could create a board, and you must use a dice, a counter for each player, and a colourful board. You might like to copy the one that we have here on screen, or you might like to make up your own board. And then you would need to create some rules. So the player who starts is the person who, for example, rolls a number 5. If you land on a red, you must. If you land on a blue, you must. If you land on a yellow or a green. And the winner is the person who, and you might decide, reaches the end first. And you would be deciding what the different colours of the board mean. So if I was designing this game, I might think, if you land on a red, go forward 2 spaces. I might decide, if you land on a blue, you must go back 2 spaces. So you can come up with your own rules for a game that will help you to think about different types of rule. And when you've designed that game, you can think, did the players understand? Did they think the game was fair? And what improvements would you like to make to the game? I hope you enjoyed making and creating your own game to think about rules. And that is the end of our assembly today. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about rules. I hope you've learned something from Syra's story where she wished that rules would go away, but then actually realised the next day that it created such chaos and made a world where people didn't feel safe and didn't feel respected. Thanks very much for listening to this week's assembly, and I very much look forward to seeing you back in school next week. Bye everyone, and take care.